Welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neil Howard, here on Health Professional Radio. We're going to be speaking with Kate Drake. Now, Kate is head of product marketing with Corindus. It's a Siemens Healthineers Company, and she's joining us here on Health Professional Radio to talk about CorPath GRX. Welcome to Health Professional Radio, Kate Drake.
Thank you for having me today.
Head of product marketing with Corindus. A bit of your background, and how did you come to be at Corindus?
So interestingly enough, I've actually grown up with Corindus. So I started at the company back in 2010. So it's been about a decade. At the time, we were mostly a startup. Didn't have a product yet that was commercialized. So I've seen the company through commercialization of two generations of technology. There was an IPO in there, and then subsequently this recent acquisition by Siemens Healthineers.
And what is the core of Corindus? What is the mission of Corindus?
So our mission is to transform interventional treatment through robotic technology. Our core really started in cardiology, and the company was founded by an engineer and an interventional cardiologist who wanted to find a better way to be able to perform what's known as coronary angioplasty procedures. So when someone needs a stent placed in their heart in order to open blocked arteries. But since then, we've evolved the technology to not only address different segments of the vasculature, such as the peripheral vasculature of the body, as well as eventually the brain for the neurovasculature. But we've also developed newer technologies to do things that physicians maybe couldn't do in the past. So automated movements that can standardize treatment, as well as remote care, which is really the future of our technology, the ability to have access to treatment, even if you live somewhere where that normally wouldn't be available to you, whether you're having something like a heart attack or potentially even a stroke in the future.
Is Corindus in the testing phase? Are you FDA approved on most of your products? Or are you in the approval stage on many of them?
We have FDA clearance as well as a number of other regulatory clearances throughout the world for our existing technology, which we call CorPath GRX. That's the second generation of our technology that has regulatory approval. Great. We're also working on newer technologies that will not only extend the capabilities of this existing platform, but also working on next generation robotic technologies that will address different procedures, specifically addressing remote stroke in the future. So we've been FDA cleared since about 2012 with robotics. We've done about over 8,000 procedures at roughly 70 programs worldwide, but still actively looking to see how we can improve our technology and create new technologies that serve an unmet need in healthcare.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some of the core capabilities of CorPath GRX and some of the benefits of robotics.
Absolutely. I would bucket it into a few different categories. The first would be precision. So I think this is pretty well known. Robotics across healthcare, even across different industries, add a level of precision that's not possible with human hands. So we can move devices in very small increments, as small as a millimeter, and we can position devices within the body very accurately. So patients have the benefit from that of potentially reducing the need for additional stents, as well as potentially reducing their exposure to radiation. So protection is really important because interventional procedures are done using X-ray. So radiation exposure is something that both the physicians and the staff, as well as the patients, are experiencing. And with robotics, you can drastically reduce the operator radiation exposure, but there's also potential to reduce radiation exposure for patients. And then finally, the other component would be this idea of standardization of care through automation. So we've implemented movements with our technology that are designed to help physicians with different parts of the procedure, whether that's navigating their access devices or delivering their therapeutic devices. We have algorithms within the system that are designed to create repeatable processes that they can utilize in order to do that and hopefully be more successful and faster when they do that. And so that's our existing technology, CorPath GRX.
AI combined with robotics.
So AI is I would consider AI to be more of the future of where automation goes from here. So if you think about it, what we're doing right now is what we would call open loop algorithms. So basically software modifications we can make to the system that are just a repeatable activity. In the future, we're thinking about how do we look at this from a data perspective as well as from a closed loop algorithm perspective. So thinking about how can you take the imaging within the room and create essentially a path plan where a physician could be looking at the images and pointing at where they need to go, and then the system would physically drive the wire there or whatever device it is that they're navigating in the body using the robot. And that would be kind of a combination of imaging and robotics working together. Now, AI, if you think about all of these procedures that are being done, and in cardiology in particular, there's about 1 million procedures in the United States per year that are being done. If you can take all of that data from those procedures and use it to mine information about what types of devices are being used, what are the best treatment pathways, and you can hone it into what is most similar to the case that's in front of you, you can create a really prescriptive approach to procedures that will hopefully improve success rates and clinical outcomes for patients.
You mentioned remote operation. Obviously, there are benefits with robotics on the regular day-to-day. Telehealth, telemedicine has exploded. How do you see the role of robotics being implemented in this entering the era of no-touch care, or as little touch as possible for as long as is needed?
It's a great question, and I think that I look at this in two different components. So there's what are we going to be able to do today with robotics to help protect patients and healthcare providers? And then how might we think about this when we look at a future pandemic that could potentially happen? And how do we create technologies that can support the continuation of this life-saving treatment while not putting people at risk? So for today, robotics pulls the operator away from the patient table. It puts them in an interventional workstation to robotically manipulate their devices. So by that fact, it is creating what we call procedural distancing. So the physician is no longer next to the patient, so neither the patient nor the operator are getting that exposure. And in addition, there would typically be bedside staff in the room. Those bedside staff, because of the robotic system, are able to step further away from the patient as well so that they can reduce their exposure. It's something that's always been a benefit on the radiation side, but now really truly applies to this idea of procedural distancing that we're seeing today. And we think that as our customers, specifically right now, start to relaunch their elective procedures, that they're going to start utilizing robotics in that format in order to create and maximize that distance. Now, when we think about a future pandemic and how you might be able to apply technology there, telehealth in its current form is mostly a diagnostic tool. With robotics, it becomes a treatment tool. So you create this new idea of telemedicine as teletreatment, where you could have a patient in one location and a physician manipulating their devices from a totally different location. We've actually already proven that we can do that, and we've done a number of preclinical studies, as well as 5 human patients that were treated from a physician who was located roughly 20 miles away. So the technology is already in development. We've proven that it's feasible and that it can be safe to do so. And so when we think about how we might apply that in the future, we're thinking about all of these different procedure segments that we're already working in and what might be the need, both from an access to care perspective, just generally. Some of these procedures like stroke, the number of patients that are being treated today versus what could be treated is very limited, but also thinking about it from this perspective of how do you just change treatment in general in order to make it safer for patients, for healthcare providers, for everyone involved. And remote could be a real opportunity here in this pandemic situation.
Give our listeners a web address or some internet access to some more information about Corindus and about CorPath GRX specifically, and maybe learn a little bit more or a lot more about robotic-assisted procedures.
Absolutely. So there's 2 websites that I'd want the listeners to go to. The first is our our company website, corindus.com, that's CORINDUS.com, to learn more about CorPath GRX, how it works, and what the benefits of that technology are. And then also for anyone interested in learning more about the procedures that we're doing and how this is being applied, we also have a website called Robotic-PCI.com. A tremendous amount of educational information on that site. So these are really great resources to learn about not only what we're doing with our existing technology, but also this roadmap of where we go from here in remote and automation and why those things are so important for patient care in the future.
Kate, it's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. Thanks for joining us here on Health Professional Radio.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Kate Drake, Head of Product Marketing with Corindus. Copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Listen in, download it, SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.